we're gonna reverse sear some steaks on my little barbecue gas grill, which we're gonna have to do a little bit of finagling on this thing, but we'll get into that a little bit later. Okay, the first thing we have to do is actually get some good steaks from the supermarket. This doesn't always happen in my local supermarket, that you actually find some good steaks. So I don't eat steak that often because I only buy them when they look good. I got a ribeye, which is my favorite steak, and a filet, which is my wife's favorite steak. So when I'm looking for a good steak at the supermarket, it's all about the intramuscular fat. All these little white specks throughout the meat. Not necessarily the big chunks of fat on the outside. This one doesn't have a lot. It's all about the little bits inside. If I see a lot of that, which for an Austrian steak, this is quite a lot, I'm usually gonna buy it. To season the steak perfectly, I like to dry brine it, which is simply just put some salt on there. You can stick it in the fridge. Best is overnight, but if you just got a few hours, this also helps massively. Before we start any of the other side dishes, which is gonna go along with the steak, I'm just gonna give these a good sprinkling of salt. Why we dry brine the steak? When you put salt on any piece of meat, it's gonna draw moisture out. Now when the moisture comes out of the steak, it'll actually dissolve all of the salt that's sitting on top of the steak, and then the steak, after some time, will suck that moisture back in, and it perfectly seasons the steak all the way through, not just on the surface. This is why I like to dry brine. Simple enough, all over it. Also, I should have mentioned thickness to a steak, especially if you're gonna reverse sear. A nice thick one is best, because otherwise, if it's too thin, it's gonna cook way too quickly, and you'll never get a chance to sear it because you're gonna overcook your steak. A nice thick one, at least 2 fingers, which this one's a little bit more, absolutely perfect for reverse searing. Thin steaks will not work at all for this technique. You can see this little bit of silver skin. If you want it to be super pedantic, you could cut that off. But in my opinion, this is quite thin, and when you finish cooking this steak, you won't even notice it's there. So I'm just gonna leave it there. If you had a lot of thick silver skin, I would take the time and cut that out. But to me, these look pretty good. So I'm just gonna sit these on a rack, and then we're gonna chuck them in the fridge for the next couple of hours while we get everything else ready. Another little thing, when I prepare meat, I will always put these plastic boards on top of my wood board. Then when I'm finished, this, I chuck straight in the dishwasher and it sanitizes. Easy cleanup. It's time to get the steaks on the grill. The meat has a much darker red color. That means that the dry brining has worked. Also, I've got some more steaks here, as you can see. And the reason why I picked this steak here, as you can see, this has like a fat seam that comes in here. Now this muscle on top, it's called the spinalis. This is a very, very tasty piece of ribeye. So anytime I see a big bit on the outside, I always like to get one, even though it's not as well marbled as that one. Here's my little gas grill. Now this thing runs quite hot, even when it's on low, as low as it can go. So to reverse sear, we're gonna put the steaks on cold, and then we're gonna actually start the grill then. So it keeps it at a nice low temperature. Then we'll let it come up to temperature. As you can see, it is running quite hot at the moment. We're already gonna start flipping these steaks over, just to give it even cooking on them. So here we are, got my steaks pulled off of the grill, and they're looking super grey and unappealing, which when you're reverse searing, for the first step, is what you're actually looking for. So as I was cooking them on my little barbecue, it was getting too hot in there, so I actually had the lid open for the last bit, and I was flipping these steaks constantly to get even cooking, and I had my little meat probe in there to make sure I wasn't overcooking them. As each of these steaks individually come up to 50 degrees Celsius, I took them off. So I think this one was first, and this one was last. These two will come somewhere in the middle. This one is a lot thicker than this one is, so it stands to reason it cooked a lot quicker. We're gonna let these rest for a good 15 to 20 minutes while we get the barbecue turned all the way up to full, and then we'll get that good color on them. It's time to sear these bad boys off. They're not gonna be on there long, 30 seconds, 45 seconds maximum on each side. You don't wanna cook them much more because they're already cooked to medium rare. You just wanna get a good crust. So with the grill, the more you move these things around, the more browning you're going to get around the steak. So don't be afraid to shimmy them all around and also find the hot spots on the grates. And when you're happy with the crust, just take them off. So with steak, butter goes great. After you cook it, you put a bit of butter on top, let it melt over, makes it absolutely amazing. What makes it even better is a compound butter. Now to give my steak a little Australian twist, I'm making Vegemite compound butter. It's going to make this steak absolutely pop. So it's as simple as that. You get your Vegemite out of your jar, you mix it through your butter, get it all nicely combined. Now if you don't like Vegemite, or you can't get a hold of any, miso would be an amazing substitute to make a compound butter off and put on top of your steak. Once you've got it all mixed through, and you've given it a taste, and the Vegemite amount is at your liking, we'll get some happy wrap out, or cling film, cloud wrap, saran wrap, whatever you want to call it. I assume it's different in every country, like everything else. We go ahead, pop it in the middle. So we get it into a nice little uniform log shape. Once it sets up in the fridge, you can cut out little rings, which is perfect to put on top of the steak to melt over it. As soon as you take the steaks off of the grill, you're gonna go ahead, put down some of that Vegemite compound butter we made. And because this stuff is so good, I'm putting 2 pads on mine. I'm just gonna move this around, get a nice even meltage all over the steak. So, it's time to slice into this steak, see how I did. Looks pretty damn good to me. No grey band, evenly cooked all the way through. Just how I like my steak. So obviously, a steak dinner is more than just steak. It's got to have something to go with it. So I'm going to be making some Dauphinoise potato and pickled zucchini. So this is how you make the potatoes. You want to slice them up evenly to make them cook evenly. Now you could use a knife doing this. It's going to make them a little inconsistent and it's going to take you forever to do that. You could also use a hand mandolin. It's going to be a little bit quicker and there's also a possibility to lose your fingertips while you do it. So the best thing to do is to pick yourself up a food processor. Now I got mine connected to the top of my stand mixer. It's an option. Or you could buy a standalone food processor. They're very inexpensive. I think you can pick them up for 50 or 60 euros at the shop. And they're perfectly fine. So, simple enough. Just pop them on in. If you're keeping the skins on like I did, make sure you give them a good wash under some fresh water. You know, they grow on the ground, make sure you get all that dirt off. Typically this potato dish uses onions. But I'm gonna use something, in my humble opinion, is the most underrated vegetable in the whole supermarket. It's the leek. Absolutely love this stuff. I'm going to treat it just as you would if you were putting the onions in, but I'll probably leave it a little bit chunkier. To prepare them, just slice them down the middle like that, and then in between these layers, you'll always get some dirt, as you can see like that one. So I like to just split them all in half, and then run them under the tap, and just wash out in between those layers. Zip off the ends, straight down the guts, and then we run them under the tap. Once you've got them all washed out, just go ahead and slice them up. So you want to butter your dish, your bacon dish. Now I'm using butter. You could use a little bit of oil, but butter tastes good with potatoes. This is not a traditional Dauphinoise potato, but you know, look at the name of my channel, traditional but not. It may not be traditional, but it's gonna taste damn fine. Okay, so I've got some cream in my jug here, and to that, I'm gonna add a teaspoon of dry thyme, because I don't have any fresh, so I'm using the dried stuff. I'm also gonna add a teaspoon of white pepper, and a couple of teaspoons of salt. We'll go on with 2. I got some finely cut up garlic I'm going to put on in there. I'm just going to go ahead and give this a little mix through. So you could actually go through and do this absolutely perfectly lined up like this, but in my opinion, it takes way too long. So I'm just going to scatter them all over. And once I've got essentially a good layer of potato down, don't forget to chuck in a bit of your leek. And then intermittently, we'll just pour over some of this cream mixture. So we'll go through and get it all loaded up. Okay, so I've got my bacon dish filled up here. And if you paid close attention, the top layer is potato. And that's by design, because we're going to cover this now with some baking paper first, and then we're going to put some foil over the top. Now put the baking paper first, because when we go in the oven and we take this off later on, sometimes I've had in the past that if we just put the foil actually sticks to the potatoes and it makes a whole mess. So it just makes this a whole lot easier. Now the reason why we put the potato on top is when we remove this later, we put some cheese. It's going to get nice and golden and crispy. And if we had the leek on top, that would have burned. But the potatoes, golden and delicious. That's why we do that. So now we just go along, get it wrapped up nice and tight with the foil. All right, now we got this nicely wrapped up. We're going to stick it into 170 degrees Celsius, preheated oven, for about an hour. And then we'll come back and, remove it, put the cheese on, all this good stuff. So we'll come back in about an hour. So my potatoes have been in the oven for about an hour and a half at this point. Now they're still not tender yet, but there's the point. I'm going to remove all of the foil and the baking paper, and we're going to spread a layer of Grana Padano over the top. You can pretty much use any cheese that you want, but I like this Grana Padano. It doesn't melt down into a big greasy mess, and also when it does cook on, it leaves like a nice little crust on top, and that's what I'm after. All right, I'm also going to bump the temperature up on the oven to 200 degrees. Then we're going to stick this back in uncovered. So I just pulled the potatoes out of the oven. They're looking golden brown and delicious. You have to let this thing rest for at least 20 to 30 minutes. If we were to cut into this now, you take the slice out, it will just all over the place. Make sure you let it rest. I'm going to make some zucchini, but I bet you haven't had it this way before, which is just pickled. I've got my zucchini here. Just going to zip off the ends. And I must say, I just got my knives back from the sharpener. They are absolutely amazing. I'm not pushing the vegetables anymore, I'm actually cutting. The first thing I'm going to do is just zip off a little bit on the bottom, so I have a flat surface to work on so it's not rolling all over the place. Now you could use a mandolin for this, but I don't actually have one where I can set the thickness, and all of my mandolins, they're actually a little bit too small at the moment. So this is why I'm using my knife. So we're just gonna go ahead and zip these off into nice thin little ribbons. So we're looking something for about this thick. Now it's not super thin or it's not super thick, it's just right. Don't get too caught up. If it's a little bit thicker or a little bit thinner, it's going to turn out just fine. So now we're going to make up the pickle liquid for this zucchini, which is very simple to make. It's just half water and half barrique vinegar, which in my case is 250 mils of water and 250 mils of this amazing tasting vinegar. Obviously, you could use whatever vinegar you have in the cupboard, or if you have a favourite, you could also use that. It's completely up to you. But for me, that's my favourite. Now to this, I'm also going to add a teaspoon of coriander seed, a teaspoon of whole tri-coloured peppercorns, and obviously some salt. Usually I just kind of bung everything in by eye, but because I'm doing this with a video, I'm measuring everything out. So that's a tablespoon worth of salt. I'm also going to add a tablespoon of sugar in. Now if you're using a different type of vinegar, the amount of sugar you put in is going to be different. So you just give this a little mix up, give it a taste, and see what you think. But I know from personal experience using this type of vinegar that I'm using, a tablespoon of sugar is more than enough. Alright, now we're just going to bring this up to a boil to get everything nice and dissolved. And then once it's boiling, we'll put in all of the zucchini. So, it was all up to a boil, and I've got my zucchini transferred over into this little bowl here. So now, simple enough, just gonna pour all of this pickling liquid straight over the top. Now, you might not think this is enough liquid, but because we added salt to the brining liquid, this will actually draw out some of the moisture from the vegetable, and it will create more liquid. We're just gonna get this all pushed down. We can get a piece of paper towel. I'll just use one piece, and just go ahead and push that in, and then that'll soak up some of the liquid, and that'll make sure that every piece of zucchini is in contact with the brine. Simple as that. Now we set it aside. Any steak that I can cut with a butter knife, I'm all in for. Let's see how this is. Because I'm Australian, I absolutely love the addition of the butter Vegemite on there. Adds a nice, subtle Vegemite flavour, but most importantly, packs in that umami saltiness that all steak kind of needs. Boost the flavour of it. Alright, let's see how these side dishes are. Pickled zucchini. There's a lot of richness throughout this ribeye steak, so that cuts through it absolutely wonderfully. Nice vinegary pop to it. Let's see how these potatoes with the leek turned out. So, when you cook this dish, don't forget to put salt on the actual potatoes when you load them in the pan. Unlike myself, who completely forgot about it. So, let's see how it is now. Now it's absolute perfection. I'd highly recommend the leek. As I said before, the most underrated vegetable in the supermarket, in my opinion.